However, designing and building a cool robot that does well in competition is a lot more fun. Trust me. It is very hard to build a good robot without a plan. You need to know what this robot is going to do. What's your aim? What is your goal? For most teams, the clear choice is, hey, I want to be successful. I want to win matches. I want to win blue banners. This is a goal. There's lots of other objectives, and that's cool too. However, your team needs to figure out what your aim is going to be. That's the first thing. So when we talk about strategic design, you are working towards goals, but you have to find your big picture goal first. A lot of teams, 11, 14 included, the first thing we'll do on the board is, right, world championship. That is the goal. We will look at our seasons, and for the past, however many years, 12, 13 years, only one season was successful. The rest were failures. That's okay, but you have to have that goal. In all those failures, we caught excellence along the way, so it wasn't a loss, but the goal was set. Figure out what that is. Now, when you're doing goals, a lot of teams get caught up in the cool factor. And it's like, I need to make sure our robot is power-coded all pretty. And you lose track of other things. When you focus too much on secondary goals, you could be sacrificing things with your own robot, which could be hurting your 33 alliance partners throughout the region. So just think about that one here. If you focus on goals that are secondary to the competition, you could be shortchanging other teams. So it's a tough balance here because you want to focus on what's best for your team, but So now that you know what your aim is, and we're just going to go with the assumption here that people are trying to build good robots. Like if you're asking me on how to build a pretty robot, well, go to another seminar. I hear the cheesy foods are giving one like down the hall. They build the prettiest robots. They build the best robots, but they also build the prettiest robots. 11, 14, we build good robots, but they're really ugly. Like, if you look at them, sometimes it's like random blocks of wood, a golf club, a butter knife, a rake, a solo cup, another solo cup, and another solo cup. Like, these are things we've actually used on our robot. The solo cup was empty. Okay? No ping pong balls, Okay, so this sounds basic, but the first thing you have to do when kickoff happens is read the rules. You have to read them cover to cover. It's very, very basic, but teams just miss this. Teams watch that animation, it's like, okay, we need to build a robot to do this. You don't know what you're doing, man. I remember in 2012, there was 3 bridges on the field. A red bridge for red robots to balance on, a blue bridge for blue robots to balance on, and a white bridge in the center of the field for both alliances to balance on. There was a team who shall remain nameless, and they didn't really read anything. They just said, oh yeah, we want to build a robot to balance the bridge. They were really good. They get to their regional, they're just killing it every match, but they never got co-op points. I'm like, hey guys, how come you never go co-op the white bridge? Like, oh, we don't actually know what the white bridge is for. Dude, we're like halfway through a regional. What do you think it was there for? Like, decoration? He's like, I don't know, like we heard it was like the friendship bridge, so it was like for robots to be graciously professional. It's like, no, seriously, you didn't read the manual. And these things actually happen. And now this is like an extreme situation. But if you don't read the manual, you will miss important things, like all of strategic design. It won't even happen. So you always have to examine every possible way to score points. That's the first thing you do. It doesn't matter how extreme or random it is. It could be an effective strategy. In 2008, there was one team, so everyone was concerned with just shooting balls over the overpass. That's what got you 8 points. It was the big target. It was a 40-inch ball. Everyone was focused on that stuff. You got 2 points for driving in a circle. There was a couple teams that just drove in a circle. No ball manipulator, nothing. Just drove in a circle, just drove in a circle, just drove in a circle, And people were like, what does that little robot do? It just drives in a circle, And people were like, that's a dumb robot. Well, guess what? You know what we call that robot now? World champion. So, Team 148 in 2008, they won the championship with this robot that just drove in circles. They were a great party. It was a good time. So you need to consider these things, look at every possibility. Then, you need to look at every possible way to deny your opponents from scoring points. You need to find a way, because it's all about the deltas, folks. It's all about the change in the difference in the score. Maybe. We'll talk about that in a second here. But you want to find a way to affect that delta. You can affect that delta by adding. You can affect that delta by subtracting from the opponent. So you need to think about these sorts of things. How you can play defense. And so you look at those two, but now you've got to look at the ranking system. And so here's the thing. For years, there was what I called the golden age at first, where the ranking system was very simple. You won matches, it was good. You lost matches, it was bad. It was easy. You knew your goal was to win matches. Then first started throwing monkey wrenches out there, which it changed things, where your goal wasn't always to win a match. In 2010, your goal was to get I'm going to simplify it here, the most points scored between you and your opponent. And sometimes it was better to actually have your opponent score more points than you, which sounds really weird. A lot of teams missed this concept, and hence their strategic design went in the wrong area. So remember, you set a goal. Your goal is to win competitions. To figure out how to achieve this goal, you need to know what are the mechanisms that win competitions. And I'm talking about mechanisms, I'm not talking about robot mechanisms, but what is the gameplay scoring mechanics that will lead you to winning. For example, this year, just winning matches isn't sufficient. You get extra huge points, these ranking points, for breaching and for capturing. A lot of teams kind of miss this concept. So when we talk about the low goal versus high goal trade-off this year, early on in the season, and actually now with the tower strike raise, even at this event, even though high goal points are worth more, you get 5 points for a high goal, those low goal shots actually could be more valuable to your alliance because of that huge ranking point you get for capturing. Without doing this sort of analysis, when I get the manual, the first thing I do is flip straight to the tournament section, looking at the rankings, how that works. I've seen the animation already. I have an idea of what the game's going to be. I go straight to that ranking section because that's going to affect the goal map of trying to win a championship. So you make these lists. Best way to score points, best way to deny points. Tie it into the ranking system on what the ranking system's rewarding, and then rank these things in your list. Now all of a sudden, you're like, oh, you can almost see the flow of a match based on these sorts of rankings. Chokehold strategies. This is something that you should always be looking for. Now, I'm going to say this right here. The game design committee for First is very good at their job. And they've been doing a very good job at making sure chokehold strategies are not a thing in FRC anymore. However, here's what a chokehold strategy is. And first of all, the definition of chokehold strategy for FRC, this is it. Don't believe what these random kids are posting on Chief Delphi. It's like that. You don't know what you're talking about. How about this? Just don't go on Chief Delphi. Everyone's life is better. I'm going to breathe for a second. I'm just about to go on a rant, but I'm just like, no. No. Maybe later.
After the show.
No, not doing it. Okay, that's it. A strategy which, when executed, guarantees victory independent of any action by your opponents. That means you have found a subset of the game, a strategy. Because if your chokehold strategy is, this is I'm going to cross all 5 defense at once, twice, and then no, it has to be a subset of things. Like a section of the game that if you execute this section of the game, you take it over. So in 2002, there was one. It was so cool that it happened. There was 3 goals on the field, and there was a bunch of balls on the field. And goals got points for being in a zone. However, balls got points for being in a goal only if the goal was in that zone. So what that meant is if your alliance had all the goals in your zone, your opponents couldn't score any points for having goals, and they couldn't score points for having any balls. And so each goal was worth 10 points in a zone, so that's 30 points right there. And you got 10 points for this is back in the 2-on-2 era, folks. You got 10 points for having a robot in your home zone at the end of the match. So one alliance could get 2 robots in their home zone, and then maybe they could kidnap their opponent robot and keep them back here, because you could do that year. I know, it's kind of crazy. So you get 30 points. But my alliance has my robot here in my zone, and I got 3 goals, so it's 30 points each. The tiebreaker that year was who had the most goals. So if you got your 3 goals in your zone, you were guaranteed to win every match. If you could get 3 goals, except the problem was these goals weighed 180 pounds each. And they were spread across the field, which was then 24 feet wide. So you would have to have a robot that could expand to 24 feet grab the goals, and then move them into your zone and not be moved. So grab 540 pounds of stuff and move them. So, everyone kind of said, oh, well, that's impossible, let's move on. Limits, like fears, are often an illusion. Team Hammond, Team 71. Now, I gotta say this right now. We talk about the best teams in first right now. I talked about 254, about 1678, 2056 and whatever. Back in the day, there was Team 71, and that was it. 4 world championships, the most of anyone. 97, 2001, 2002, 2004. They were the team where, this was before really, I know it's gonna sound weird. The internet wasn't really that big of a thing. And there was no YouTube at this point. So at Team Hammond's first event, there was no bag and tag then either. Robots showed up in crates, wooden crates like they do at the championship. There would be this throng of 400 people surrounding their pit just as they're uncrating so everyone could get a glimpse of what they had built. Because everyone knew it was going to be crazy. And so in 2002, they were just coming off winning a world championship in 2001 with arguably the most dominant robot in first history. And then they came out with this thing. And the robot, it stood up to start matches, vertical, 5 feet tall. And then it would literally fall over. And when I was younger, I used to do this on stage. I would just fall over, And so then it would fall over, it would shoot forward, and these giant arms would just kind of whip out. And all of a sudden, they are the width of the field. And they would grab the goals and bring them back. So suddenly they've got one goal right here, and they've won the other 2 goals. They now have 540 pounds of mass, plus their 120-pound robot. We're talking 660 pounds. How did they move? They only had wheels to get them this far. The rest of the way, they had no wheels. They had no ability to turn. They could only go straight. They had file cards, which actually dug into the carpet. And they would just kind of inch their way, moving at about 1 to 2 inches per second. As soon as they got the goals, the match was over because no one could stop them from getting to that point. You know how FRC announcers, anyone who's game announced for done FMC, we're taught to be really positive. Actually, if your robot's not good, we won't tell you. We'll say nice things. And so, one match, Beatty just grabs the goals, and Ron Partridge, who used to be one of the best announcers, this guy goes, well, it ain't over till it's over, but there ain't much hope. And so, this is 15 seconds of the match. And then he was narrating the credits. He's like, hey everyone, well this match is just going, let's thank all the sponsors, and this is great. And hey, look at all the other 5 teams in this match, or 3 teams in this match. And they're doing their thing. Team 66, you're great. He had nothing to talk about because the match was over. That is a chokehold. And it was the coolest thing ever. And first had to get rid of him because it made the entire season really boring. However, what did we talk about earlier? When you try and chase perfection, you catch excellence along the way. When you try and chase a chokehold strategy, one may not exist. However, you will find a lot of other optimal strategies along the way. So this is an exercise you should do. Try and find one single finite task that overwhelms all other possible ways of scoring. There's the algebra lessons to be taught in this when you look at the scoring matrix, and you learn a lot by doing this, so I really recommend it. You're probably not going to find one, but what if you do? What if you're the ones that find it? And what if you're the ones who aren't afraid of it? And go for it. Cool things happen, man. Okay, cost-benefit analysis. We talked about ranking all the scoring tasks. However, for each task, you need to compare the difficulty of accomplishing it to the reward for doing so. Just because something is worth a lot of points doesn't necessarily mean it's worth doing because it can be really, really hard. In 2013, the 30-point climb was a lot of points. But man, was that hard. So you have to be really, really careful here. The goal is to perform tasks which are relatively easy to do, but provide big points. For example, this year, what is easier? Driving over the rough terrain. Why do they even call that a defense? Why don't they just call it the open slot? But seriously, driving over the rough terrain or putting a ball in the high goal. These defenses were, and I think most FRC teams got that this year. They realized that these defenses were low-hanging fruit, and they went for them. However, it's kind of crazy when I see teams, how many matches I see the Sally Port unused. And it's like, all you gotta do is like back up and do the wiggle, 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 you know? Sorry, I just want the booty shake. And you get that point. What's easier? Just doing that little wiggle, wiggle, or putting the ball in the high goal? If you do that wiggle, wiggle, unless the refs are blind, you're guaranteed those 5 points. Not gonna say it, not gonna say it. However, that high goal shot you're taking, you could miss. It's not a guarantee. And so, gotta go for these low-hanging fruit. Gotta go for the low-hanging fruit. This is often where the strategic value versus the coolness factor decision happens. Like, obviously the high goal seems cooler, but like that low goal has real value. You know, we talked about the low goal's value in terms of cap rate and stuff. But a lot of teams just get really caught up in we have to do the hardest task. I'm saving it. I'm going to talk about the whole low bar thing in a second. We're going to save that. So, also remember, defense is really, really important. Denying an opponent 10 points is just as good as scoring 10 points. So, often, de-scoring and defending is much easier than scoring. If you think about in 2013, there was those great full court shooters. You know, you could just launch frisbees across the field. And then, you know, you'd be paired with the cheesy poofs and they put a bunch of pool noodles on your robot and then they'd stop them. What's easier, you know? So you need to be careful of these things. Also, when you think you've found this high optimal task, how easily can it be defended? How many high goal shooters this year have we seen that are great on Friday, great on Saturday morning, the eliminations start, and then they're shut down? So, things to think about. Priority lists. You need to have 2 separate lists. So, the first is, what are your desired robot qualities? Like, what are the qualities that are going to play the best, that are going to play into the game? Speed, power, agility, center of gravity. These things are prioritized on one side. On the other side, you want to prioritize the things you want your robot to do. Shoot balls, get over defenses, traverse the field. Then, at some point, you can merge these 2 priority lists and design upon a drive system the functionalities you want your robot to have. And suddenly, now, you can start talking about building a robot and what your robot's going to look like. But you have to go through this whole process first. Otherwise, this list is going to be based on nothing. Here's the secret, guys. Most teams don't do this. And for lack of better terms, and we're going to talk about this in a second, most FRC teams are unable to, I'm going to be blunt, most FRC teams are unable to play the game well. It's just a thing that we have to go through. Early on in the season, the average number of balls scored in the high goal by a team in like weeks 1, 2, and 3 was usually between 0.2 and 0.4. The big task the game design committee wanted people to do, the average team could do less than half of one in a match. And you might say, oh, well, they must have been all low goal. No, the low goal average was pretty much the same. Because teams didn't go through this process, they were focusing on all in the wrong areas. And so it's, okay, it's coming. Okay, if you're going to walk away from this presentation with only 2 things, well, actually, no, walk away with the quotes from before. That's probably the most important thing. Next, these 2 golden rules. This is really the key to strategic design. The first one is just blown by teams everywhere, so we're going to sit and talk about this. Golden rule number 1. Always build within your team's limits. Yes, we talked about limits often being unreal, but these are limits you have to determine. It's not going to be the limits that the team down the street tells you, oh, you can't do this. You need to figure out what your limits are. So what defines your limits? You need to honestly and realistically evaluate the resources you have. Resources and limits in first are not just defined by money. People who think that are just in la-la land. Manpower, budget, experience. This is the 3 things. You need to figure out what you're capable of doing. This is hard. Because sometimes you can feel like you're selling yourself short, and other times you can do the opposite. So I've seen teams who build too conservatively and then forego important things. But for the most part, I see teams that build too much stuff, and they just can't. Like, in a game like this year, trying to do the low bar and have a high goal shooter and have a hanger is something that really, when our team plotted it out, we thought maybe there would only be 15 to 20 teams that be first in all of FRC that could do it effectively. We actually had a big debate whether it would be 25 teams or 5 teams that could do it effectively, which is at a level where we thought that they'd be shooting 5 to 6 balls per match, have the ability to hang, and go under the low bar. Realistically, I think at that level in the world right now, it's probably about 10. How many teams tried to do all that? And how many of those teams, if you ask them, hey, are you as good as the Cheesy Poofs? They would be like, no. Why are you trying to be the Cheesy Poofs? Why aren't you trying to be you? Why aren't you trying to be the best team that you can be and working within your limits? So, you need to, even within this, it's not necessarily about, hey, I want to score in the high goal, but how do you want to do it? Because some teams will find a really complicated way to do it, while other teams will find simpler ways to do it. So if you say the high goal is your priority, and you really want to hit this whole thing with the high goal, well then, maybe you want to do it the easier way by having your shooter higher up in the air. But everyone's like, no, I gotta go to the low bar, man. Everyone's going to the low bar. I gotta be. Most teams cannot pick up a ball when they have 60 inches of robots to work with. And now all of a sudden you want to try picking up a ball and shooting it 7 feet in the air with 15 inches. You are backing yourself into a deep, deep corner. My favorite 2 robots this year are 1241 and 5172. 1241 up from Canada. 5172 is this team from Minnesota that no one's ever heard of, who I think might have the best robot in the world. I keep saying that, people keep looking at me crazy, but I think they might, because I've not seen them miss a shot this season. I don't know, has anyone seen 5172 miss a shot? Yeah. How many?
1.
In a match or at the regional?
That's a tease.
I mean, hey, we think we're pretty good. We'll miss 3 or 4 in one match. You know, just boom, boom. We're not that good. But seriously, these guys are flipping awesome. Tall robot, though. Tall robot basically only goes over a couple defenses with a turret. Because they prioritize the high goal. They want it to be as good as possible with the high goal. They have that ability to turret. And they just 1241, can't go into the low bar, just goes across the field, sits by the secret passage, waits for dumb human players to keep just tossing them balls. Yoinks, yoinks, yoinks. It's those teams, if they had tried to do the low bar, there's no way they're even close to that level. But so many teams fell into the low bar trap. We're going to talk more about that. Golden rule number 2. If a team has 30 units of robot and functions at a maximum of 10 units, it's better to do 3 things at 10 out of 10 instead of 5 out of 6 out of 10. This is like a life lesson. So there's this whole thing right now with high school students, and it was a thing when I was in high school too, about, hey, you need to do lots of extracurriculars to get to university. You gotta be in every single club. First of all, it's usually a lie that universities tell you, because almost all universities are solely admitting you, in Canada, just based on your marks. In the US, based on your marks and your standardized testing. They don't actually have people who are filing through all these applications. They're just really hitting it right there, boom, boom, boom. But secondly, there are only so many hours in the day. How many things can you do effectively? How are you going to excel if you're trying to juggle everything in the world? Maybe you just want to focus on a couple of things. This is what I talk to about kids who want to do first when they're going into university. You can mentor an FRC team in university. It can be done. But man, you guys know how much work it is to be on an FRC team. We're talking, some people are putting in 50, 60, 70 hours a week. And you're going to do that and balance a first year in college course load in engineering with where you have 35 hours of classes. And so let's say you're doing 60 hours of first and 35 hours of class. When are you sleeping? When are you going out? When are you eating? You've got to try and find this correct balance, and you can't try and do everything. And if you try and do everything, it's not going to be as fun. You're going to be burning yourself out. Why not just do a couple things and just be flipping awesome at it? And it goes the same with robot building. You don't have to try and do everything. It's not a race to say, hey, I got the checkbox of shooter, hanger, boom. Do what you can do that'll allow you to be the best to contribute to an alliance. The voice is going again. It's only been 5 weeks. This is normal. Okay, the key to deciding upon a design is to evaluate trade-offs. We're talking about this because we're saying, hey, we know what we're doing. we're not going to try and do everything. How do you decide what to do? Well, you've got to go back to your priority list. Your priority list is define the answers to this. And if you nail that priority list, it will be there for you. So the number one thing on everyone's priority list needs to be drive. If drive isn't the first on your priority list, unless it's a really weird game where you can be a stationary robot, you're in trouble. This year's game especially, because so many points are just scored by driving in a straight line. So if you tell me that you're going to start saying, hey, it's the end of build season, we're 5 pounds overweight, I can pull sims from my drivetrain, or I can, ditch a high goal shooter. Don't pull sims from your drivetrain, are you crazy? That's like the most important thing on your robot. This game is rough and tumble, so you gotta think about these things. There was a team, 2006, I'd say I don't want to mention their name to protect them, but they don't exist anymore, and I don't remember who they were. And so, they were overweight, and they're like, and we were helping them, trying to get them through inspection, and it just wasn't working. They came up and said, hey guys, we solved the problem. We got rid of the sim. And we're like, okay, I mean, you really need to play. You had 4 sims when you drive, you dropped it up to 2. We're like, no, we got rid of 1 sim. What? Yeah, we just took 1 out. We're fine. 2 on one side, 1 on the other side. It's all good.
That works.
I can't even.
Fucking odd.
So, you gotta remember these golden rules. Thank you. Teams who try and do more than they're capable of tend to fail. There is no shame in building a simple robot. Just think back to some of our past world champions. Last year, 1678, I see you guys there. How high could you stack last year? 5. Couldn't do 6 stacks. People are like, oh, you can't win if you can't do 6 stacks. I've got to do 6 stacks quick. Did you guys lose an event last year, ever? No? I mean, they just did 5 stacks. You guys went to like good events too. Didn't you play against some good teams like the Hoofs, 118, that sort of thing? Worked out for you? They said, hey, the biggest thing in the game, everyone was like, yo, we gotta do 6 stacks. We gotta run right through the 6, man. We gotta hit the 6. We gotta hit 6 stacks. They're like, yo, the 6 is cool. We'll just do 5 stacks. And now we call them champions of the world. Congratulations, guys. So, if not doing the biggest task of the game is okay for a team like 1678, why would anyone else feel shame in that? It's not. You just need to figure out the right trade-offs. They were really, really smart in that because they figured we can drop one tote down and be fine. If they had said, we're going to do 6 stacks, but we're not going to put cans on them, that's the sacrifice we're going to make, that would have been a bad, you wouldn't have won a world championship, just to give you the heads up there. You know, they know this stuff. And a lot of teams did that. So, how did they realize this was the right thing to do? They went through some sort of strategic design process, or Mike Corset was magical. It's one or the other, or both. But it's crazy how many teams just fall into the trap of, we have to do everything, we have to do everything. So, there was a thread on that weird website, Chief Delphi, this year, and there was a poll, how many teams going to low bar? And suddenly it gets like 90% of the teams. And I posted, the results of this poll are terrifying. Everyone's like, oh my God, what's Karthik scared of? What's going on? And like, it got really creepy, and people started talking about my life and stuff, what I was scared of. And like, I'll give you the truth. I don't like driving, and I have problems when people startle me, and so, but no, realistically, I was terrified because I was like, if everyone's trying to go into a low bar, teams aren't going to be good at scoring balls. That was my fear. And then, thanks to the Blue Alliance, which kept running totals on how many balls were being scored per match this year, I was like, oh yeah, it was true. Until we got to the World and District Championships, when they had eliminated the bottom half of teams were just not good at scoring balls. And so many teams were like, we have to go to the low bar, we have to go to the low bar. But man, you're playing basketball. I know it's medieval times and all sorts of weirdness, just like, but they're playing basketball. It is easier to score in the net if you were closer and higher up. But people because they just thought the low bar is the one defense that's always going to be on there. So if we can do the low bar, we're safe. But the B and D defenses are not that hard. Andy Marks was selling a freaking drivetrain to go over them on kickoff day. Imagine that, a pre-designed drivetrain for the game. But like, it was right there for you. Andy Marks pneumatic wheels, they're right there for you. You could have done so much without doing that. And then you would be so much more valuable. These tall robots that can do the sally port and the drawbridge, you know how valuable they are this weekend? You're playing the elimination rounds, every point counts. All these matches are coming right down to the end. When I see alliances, my own included, that have ignored the sally port and drawbridge after the match, I'm just like, oh, those 10 points. Everyone can do the low bar. However, you also have to think about scarcity. If there are two tasks that are relatively equal, and you are capable of doing them effectively, it's better to do the one that's rare. Because not only are you controlling your destiny and how you're being seated, you are a more valuable selection. Teams out there who can regularly do the sally port and drawbridge this weekend, you're going to be playing on Saturday. Or you'll be the fourth robot in the alliance who doesn't play, but that's cool too. You will be out there on Saturday. And this is really, really important to think about. Because all these low bar teams, it's like, everyone does it, it's not special anymore. The only, and Dr. Joe mentioned this on Chief, but he had a good point. The low bar inadvertently did save this game. Because if there was no low bar and everyone built super tall robots, oh man, we'd have robots falling over all the time going over these defenses. It would be ugly. So low bar did force teams to lower their center of gravity, but I mean, it's really, really hard, the packaging challenge of building that small. So it's so much easier to do things. You added an extra constraint. It was just kind of crazy. So it's like, you got to think about these things. Do I really need to go for this super, super hard challenge that's making everything else harder? I don't know. But strategic design allows you to avoid pitfalls and allows you to discover pitfalls before they happen, which is kind of like avoiding pitfalls. Yeah, this slide's not interesting. Where are we at time, guys?
7:47.
Cool. Okay. Thank you. Strategic design tips. This is a must. You cannot skip this stage. This is so critical to what you're doing. You have to stay with it. Also, you need to be realistic when evaluating strategies. So here's the thing. This is another thing that teams aren't good at. Not everyone. Most teams overestimate how good teams are going to be. They haven't come to grips that most teams aren't going to be good. And as a result, they think that their robot has to do so much more. And this is when you fall into the trap of trying to do everything. Because you think everyone's going to be doing everything. And so you're like, we have to stack 6 high. We have to do it. No, you don't. Be realistic about what's going to happen in a match. This varies region from region. You need to know what it takes to be successful within your region. There were plenty of regions this year where you could just logo, and guess what? You're going to win the regional. Not all regionals, but it varies from region to region. So it's really important that you try and pick up on that. I've seen some interesting things where this year, if you built a logo-only robot with a hanger, I think you were in prime position to go to an early regional and win that regional. And then come to championship and be the ideal second robot for an alliance. And this was a cool niche that a team without a lot of resources could have thrown themselves right into. How do you figure out that niche? Understanding your region and going through proper strategic design. Now, with the tower strike being raised, those logo robots are actually even more valuable. And I hate to say it, they may end up in the dreaded middle zone, alliances 6, 7, 8 on the back end there, which could be a dangerous spot. However, if you're in the Newton division, that might be the best spot to be because that division is completely patently unfair. Oh my goodness. Who's in the Newton division? Who are you? You guys are gonna have so much fun. First of all, our whole team's like, yes, our division's right next to the Newton division, so we can just watch that. Our guy team's like, yeah, we have a bench for queuing, and we can just go sit by Newton and then go play our matches. It's gonna be awesome to watch. And what's really cool about being in the Newton division, all of us are like, man, this is scary. I don't know what it is. If you're a good team in Newton, you don't have to worry about where you seed in the top 8, because any alliance from there can win the championship. So I'm not predicting that Newton will necessarily win the championship, because sometimes you have a power division, they beat themselves all up. But man, there's some divisions where it's like, oh, you seeded 4th? Well, no, you might as well just go to the Coke Museum. That's in Atlanta. Go to Yarge, because you're toasted. But in that division, no, you're not toasted. It's going to be fun. Remember, you have partners. It's okay to leave things for your partners to do. How much you leave to them should be decided by the golden rules, but you gotta be careful here. Let's talk about independent tasks versus dependent tasks. So this year, I think you could have built a robot that said, hey, we're gonna ignore the low bar. Because we think we'll have partners that'll be able to breach that section of the low bar. And that makes sense. It's not a cooperative task, you know? However, last year, I think a lot of teams got bit by this one, where they're like, man, we can't stack and do cans. So we're just gonna stack, or we're just gonna do cans. And those were dependent tasks, that you needed someone else to do something first. And so if you were a team who was just like, I'm just gonna do cans, you fell into a dangerous spot. Because guess what? Most teams who were effective and playing into Saturday were doing both totes and cans. And it would actually slow them down to just do totes and have someone drop a can on it. So you need to look at these tasks and figure out if they're independent or dependent. And if they're dependent tasks, you need to figure out, is someone going to be doing the other task regularly? Because if you miss that, then you're in trouble. And that's when you've left too much to your partners. So I'm not saying you have to do everything, but if you are picking a subset of tasks that relies on your partners, like, for example, this year, imagine if you only got hanging points if the tower was captured. Like, if your other two partners were on the, whatever the thing is, you know, the little ledge. But I don't care about the term. The whole naming just killed me this year. Why don't we just call things what they are? A cheval de frise? Do we actually know what a cheval de frise is? I do. It was meant to kill horses. Like, what even, this whole medieval stuff, like, is this really bringing people into first? Frankly, if I was in high school and I saw this medieval thing, called it Robot Extreme Obstacle Course Basketball? Like, couldn't we just show this, like, yo, this is a game of 3-on-3 basketball, except there's wicked fences and stuff that you gotta hop the fence and then go shoot. I'd sign up for that. I'd go around the schoolyard. Hear ye, hear ye. We are here for the first stronghold. We unite all our kingdoms. Back to this. See, this is what happens. I start talking. Independent versus dependent tasks. You've got to analyze the game to figure out what you need to do and where the support's coming from. And hopefully you'll end up in the right spot. Every year I come to this slide and I say, I hate this slide. Why is it here? And then I'll forget to do anything about it until next year, so. Okay. We are into the world of scouting now. So you have come to competition. Your robot, okay, so I used to always say, once you get to competition, your robot is pretty static. It's not really changing much. But like, let's not kid ourselves. There's no more 6-week build season first. It's a 16-week build season. And your teams are constantly iterating. So what I used to say isn't true. Teams are constantly getting better. Their robot's improving. Seriously? Hey, you're walking in right now, Praneet? Sharvin, you too? Aren't you like a head referee and you just like think you could just stroll in here like this, man? You canceled on Vex Worlds last week. This is Praneet, all I gotta say is, were you working hard? Were you working hard before you got here? Okay, well then it's all right. Good luck to you. Good luck to you. So, I'm gonna stop on the 6-week rant, but the whole thing is, it's hard to improve your robotic competition. However, you can get a leg up via scouting. Because forming an alliance, well, first of all, your match strategy is dictated by what other teams are on the field. And if you are good at knowing, predicting what they're going to do, you are in a unique position to be successful. And if you know what the other teams in the competition are doing, you are in a unique position to be successful during alliance selection, where most regionals are actually won and lost. So, that's what it's crucial for. Future matches, alliance selection. Advanced scouting. So, before you even get to an event, there's lots to be learned. First, we've done a great job over the last couple of years of having a public API, and there's so much data out there on what's been happening in matches. You can get a really good idea of what teams are capable of doing. So you can look at, back in the day, there was just the match scores. That's why OPR became a thing. Like, back in 2004, all we had was match scores. That's all we got. So me and my college roommate at the time, we just kind of looking through this, like, how do we make sense of this? How do we figure out what teams are doing? And that's when we came up with the idea of throwing it all in a matrix and then just doing decomposition, ripping it all out to try and figure out the contribution of each team. That's where OPR really came from. We used to call it the least squares analysis, because we use a least squared algorithm to rip the matrix apart. But there was very little to go on. I'll talk more about OPR in a second. So you could take data back then, just match scores, and then do this sort of estimation. And I mean, it's like in the world of basketball, it's called adjusted plus minus, and it's become one of the most effective ways to analyze players. And so for years, basketball statistical analysis was based on how many points, rebounds, and assists you had. That was it. And so like for years, people thought that Allen Iverson was just like this great, and I love Allen Iverson. He was awesome. However, it was soon realized that, yeah, he scored a lot of points, but when he was on the court, his teams were X level of effectiveness, but when he came off the court, his teams got a little bit better. And that was used by doing basically OPR for basketball. And it took years for people to kind of figure this stuff out. And what's really cool is, the world of baseball, basketball, and football, they've been so reluctant to embrace advanced stats. And the advances have been slow, but I really think, and there's a lot of people at first too who are just always like, they see OPR and say, oh, it means nothing, it's stupid. OPR can have flaws, but usually when someone says OPR is stupid, it usually means they just aren't good at math and they just don't understand what it is. They just think it's a number. I'm serious. Like, people just like to ignore this stuff without going to the meaning of it. Tell me the meaning of these stats and then discard them. Because sometimes stats are ridiculous. However, statistics shouldn't be looked at in a vacuum. You shouldn't just look at a list of numbers and assume that those numbers are right. But try and analyze why those numbers are there, and then you can see where we're going with them. So there's lots of stuff you can do without ever even setting foot at a regional. Now, when you're at an event, you have your eyes. You're watching robots. You can see all the real data. Looking at advanced stats for this sort of stuff is, you're not going to manipulate stuff. But also, your eyes can play tricks on you. We all have preconceived biases. Certain teams come to an event and we just assume that they're really good or really not good. And like we see things like, that robot's power coding, oh, it must be better. And we just kind of assume things. Here's a trap that so many scouts fall into. So a team is playing their match and then their team just starts cheering like crazy. You naturally assume that that team has done something good. Guess what, kids? A lot of these people are just cheering to make noise because like the coach says you have to make noise or you're not allowed to be on the team. But there's discrete traps we fall into, and that's why going through the data analysis allows you to avoid those traps, and you're actually seeing things for what they are. Always interesting to look at past seasons. There's a high correlation between past success and future success. Yes, sometimes teams pop out of nowhere. Yes, sometimes good teams just kind of hit the dirt, but you know what I'm saying. OPR, I don't know how much algebra I want to go into right now, but basically this is, how can I know how well a team has done without actually watching any of their matches? You could look at their average score per match, which is actually a decent metric. However, that only tells you part of the story because that's heavily influenced, especially in what we do in robotics, by their partners. So let's let each team's contribution be represented by a variable. For each alliance, let TJ plus TK plus, this doesn't matter what your assumptions are, equal S, which is the amount of points scored. For each alliance in each match, you have a row of a matrix where it's going to be ones, where the team, for the three teams that played on that alliance, zeros everywhere else. You now have a giant square sparse matrix. Whip it up into V or into R, or you can, I would love to see someone hand invert that, man. And then you have to calculate the average contribution of each team throughout the regional. How valuable is this data? Depends on the game. Do I have a slide on this? Ooh, it says OPR in 2013. See, this is what happens sometimes. The title is wrong. This is OPR in 2016. It's actually pretty good this year. This game is fairly separable. Teams complete tasks independently from their partners. My scoring is not dependent on your scoring is not dependent on mine. Now, however, if there was a capture bonus in the qualification rounds, OPR then becomes very weak. Because now there's extra points that are only happening when two teams kind of converge together. And it's hard to strip those and give them the proper assignment. So Also, this year's game had linear scoring, which is very important. So if you have a game with exponential scoring, for example, in 2007, the first cube was worth 2 points, the second one made the row worth 4, then 8, 16, so on. So if you put that 8 cube on there, it suddenly ballooned up to 256, but it's an increment of 1. When you try and strip that, OPR has a really hard time, because your algorithm's just going to think that there's this huge exponential increase in the skill of the teams. However, it wasn't. It was a linear increase in the skill of the teams in that match, how the scoring was awarded exponentially. That's kind of dangerous. There were ample number of playing pieces this year for the most part, so 3 offensive robots rarely choked each other out. In some games, you'll have it where you have 3 great teams on alliance, and they can't actually score as effectively now because there's not enough game pieces, and the scoring is no longer increasing on a linear level. It's flatlining. It's hitting an asymptote. So when you hit that point, OPR kind of becomes weak. However, in this year's game, if you just kept scoring, the balls just kept coming back to you, and that human player was just leaving the secret passage for you. So you weren't choking yourself out, and that made it somewhat useful. The more important thing was this year, first gave a great breakdown of how many ball points were being scored, defense points. So you could do OPR based on boulder points, based on defense points, based on climbing. This was pretty cool. Man, people are falling asleep. That is embarrassing. I need to be more fun. I should probably make fun of someone or something. That usually gets the crowd going. Pit scouting, it's usually stupid, so. Hey! Plead all of you guys who are doing pit scouting this weekend, if you can see it with your own eyes, don't ask the question. Like, I'm not gonna go up to dude here and be like, hey man, are you wearing a hat? Like, why would I do that? I clearly see he's wearing a hat. So don't ask them how many wheels they have on the robot. Just don't waste their time. People in the pit are busy, you know, like they also, if it's an important question like, hey, what programming language do you use? You're not gonna figure that out like the robot. But like, respect people's time, respect people's space, and also, don't use pit scouting as a way to keep the annoying kids on your team busy. Okay, I get it, they're annoying, you don't want them around you, but now you're sending them to all of us. How is that? That is not like cooperation, that's not graciously professional. Everyone's got their annoying kids, deal with them yourselves. And try and work with them, mentor them, make them less annoying. We can actually do things here. You know, people grow in this program. Don't just say, hey, go ask some people questions. Also, if you don't like pit scouting, that's fine. I'm trying to think of a word that's not a swear word that I can say. Don't be a not nice person, okay? So when the annoying kid who doesn't know too much about robots comes and says, hey, how many wheels do you have on that robot? And you say, 27. That's not funny. You're just stupid. You're now wasting his time. Like, just leave him alone. Just be like, hey, we're a little bit busy, but you can take a peek. Or, oh yeah, we have 6. Is it that hard to answer the question, even if it's annoying? Like, can we not be jerks? That's another rant. Like, it's really not that hard to show mutual respect, you know? Anyways, yeah, that's the pit scouting. Match scouting. Okay, this is where it gets important. You need to watch every match. Here are the things you need to keep track of. The match score, which you shouldn't have to because the results are pretty good to be on the web. Who was here last year? Were most of you here last year? Do you guys all remember how no one knew the scores of any matches or the standings of any matches last year? It happens sometimes. So it's a good habit to keep track of these things. We were keeping track, we were just running standings in Excel constantly because that was the only way to know the rankings. It just happened. It was a technology failure. I mean, there's someone to blame, but you know, you can't. These things happen, so keep track of stuff. Points scored by each team, scoring attempts and failures. It's really important to not get overwhelmed just by how many balls a team scores, but their shooting percentage is actually a thing, you know? If you're just going to be concerned about how many points are scored, you're probably one of those people who think that Kobe Bryant's the best basketball player of all time. And I'm one of those people who says, you're wrong. First of all, he's a despicable human being. Secondly, don't even start me. I'll go on a real rant here. All I'm going to say is Colorado 2004. Look it up. It was wrong. It was disgusting. It was not right. But secondly, he missed so many shots. Efficiency matters, and in this year's game, that's why I love 51-72 and why I love 12-41. They just don't miss. And that is so, so crucial in this game because it means they're maximizing their time and they're putting their alliance in the best place to win. But if you don't keep track of this, not all robots that score 5 balls per match are created equally. And also, if you see a team that went 5 for 8 one match, hold on, maybe there's potential that this team could score 8 balls in a match. Things to think about. Penalties. This is a hard one now since first doesn't tell us who penalties are on anymore. So you kind of have to guess. That is kind of dumb. But it's important to know. I would love to be able to know if a team has been consistently taking secret passes penalties. Because that's a huge thing when it comes to playing the Olympics. The matches have been super, super close this year. And unfortunately, there are going to be a lot of matches decided on Saturday morning and Saturday afternoon purely by penalties. So scouts, if you can identify teams who are consistently taking penalties, then maybe you can A, address it with a team and say, hey, you got to watch this, you got to see what's going on, or B, warning, warning, danger, danger. Autonomous mode and starting positions. So this is one. The 60-point autonomous mode is going to be crucial this weekend. That means having 3 robots that can cross and shoot. However, lots of teams are very particular when they can shoot from an auto. And if you form an alliance and you're just like, oh, well, this team has been hitting, they scored in their 10 qualifying matches, they hit an auto 7 times, they hit an auto 8 times, we're feeling really good. You might not feel really good if they can only all score from position 1. Because all of a sudden, you need to know what these teams can do and what positions they can hit from. This is what scouting's for. Because in alliance selection, you don't have time to go and ask what these teams can do. So these sorts of things are very, very important. Watch for general strategy and tendencies. OPR is not going to tell you about that. But there are some teams who do the same repeated tasks. There's a subset of teams here that'll just go under the low bar and shoot and go back under the low bar to the secret and shoot. And man, if you just park perpendicular, they will freak out. Because some teams are doing the same thing over and over again. If you break their pattern or you break their cycle, they just don't know how to react. They've gone the whole season just doing the same thing. And you're going to make them change? It's a lot. But you can't do this unless you've been watching their tendencies. And this is where scouting matters. Drivers and human players. I think it's very important to watch. So like, at the New England District Championship, I'm watching 125 and 195 play. And it's on a webcast, so I can't really see everything. But I know 195 is just murdering it. They're just shooting. They're surrounded like balls. Like seriously, they're like Justin Bieber by fans. They're just balls all around them. Like, where do these balls all come from? I assumed their alliance was running a feeding strategy. I assumed that their third partner was dumping balls for them. And then, the regional ended and that was that. One of our scouts, who was then going back and scouting the New England District, was like, you need to see this video. One of the human players on that alliance, either 125, 195, was it 21, 68, 13? Delivered 9 balls from the human player station into the courtyard. 9 balls. They bowled them in with a slight curve and went over the low defensive position 2. 9 balls. 195 and 125 are amazing scoring robots. 195 is probably one of the top 10 robots in the world this year. But their high scores and their winning of that district championship was because of those human players. And if scouts had realized that, they would have put a freaking Sally Porter drawbridge in position 2, and everything changes. That's what good scouting can do. It is hard to notice these things. I didn't notice it on the webcast. Now, webcast is weird because you don't have like that full sort of view, but these dolphins, and like they say, hey, go fetch a tennis ball. And they were doing stuff like to train dolphins to do stuff. But once the dolphins realized that the tennis ball was pointless, they were just like, screw that, I'm a dolphin, I'm gonna go swimming. Your scouts will do the same thing. Hopefully your scouts are smarter than dolphins. Actually, there's some dolphins out there really smart. So you gotta make it fun, engage the culture, but also there's other ways to make it fun. Make it fun in the stands. So one of the things we do on our team is we have a concept called sim bucks. Basically, our team gambles on matches in the stands with fake money. Sometimes the mentors gamble with real money, you know? Like, sometimes there's been matches where there's been $100 bills on the table. It's been the most nervous I've ever been about a match in my life. But so one of the scouts or one of the mentors will kind of say, okay, this match, you know, we have 20-56 in this match. The over-under on ball score and the high goal is 5.5. And then people have to pick a side on whether they're going to be over or under. And to want to do well at these games, the scouts are paying more attention because they want to be able to understand the capabilities of teams. And so this gets people more engaged. It's just another way to make it more fun. So it's not just watching matches and writing numbers down. It's turned into something. There's all sorts of games you can play with this. It just doesn't have to be this way. But, you know, one that I always like to play is, what's the score? How many balls are going to be scored? And like, you can have a lot of fun in really, really bad matches too. Bad matches are hard to watch. Last year, every match was hard to watch. But there would be matches where I'd just be like, okay, these 6 teams don't feel bad. Because it was an amazing engineering challenge, and that part of the game was super, super cool. But in terms of being a spectator sport, I mean, it's like watching the long jump. I know the long jump is amazing athletes doing amazing things. There's only so much I can watch of people running. Actually, no, that's not true. That's running and jumping is kind of cool, but you know what I'm saying. Watching the entire field, tracking the score of the match, and where the robots are. Your drive coach needs to be both probably the smartest person on your drive team and the best communicator on your drive team. And she needs to be the best motivator. It is very, very important that you have someone who can do all these things. The drive coach also, I firmly believe that drivers should never be making decisions in matches. The coach has to be doing all that. The drivers are working on a limited subset of information while the coach has all the information. If you go with this philosophy though, you have to be careful because as the drive coach, if your drivers are relying on you, you cannot leave them hanging because they are relying on you all the time. So you cannot freeze and you cannot disappear. Or if you disappear, you better know that your team's ready for that. And by disappear, I don't mean like vanish, but actually just like step away to go help a partner. In general, during a match, teams have to make on-the-fly decisions. Lots of teams lose matches because they behave in a very static manner. They do the same thing over and over again. In an interactive game, good teams will notice that because they have good scouts and they will shut that down. Never lose sight of the main goal, which is winning the match. So often I see the situation where an alliance will go down very early in a match. So all of a sudden the match starts and they're down not this year's game, let's think of other games, but they're down 40, 50, 60 points. And they keep playing the same, let's just keep playing defense. Well, okay, if your strategy was defensive but you're already down by 100 points, you are not coming back. You are not conjure these points up if you're playing solely defensive. You have to be able to change your strategy on the fly. If you randomly are playing an all-offense strategy and you take a huge lead, choke them out now. Your points have been scored. Go play some defense. Things change on the field. The coach can make good decisions to kind of get that. Also, leave it all on the field. Give it your all. Don't be afraid of damage. Trust your pit crew, especially in the elimination rounds. You know, just go all out, take that risk, and see what happens. Because, I mean, on Saturday, what's better? To have a broken robot that might have to call a timeout going into division finals, or to be passing up your pick right after division semis. You got to take a risk, see what happens. After a match, I think a lot of teams don't do this, but it's really important to debrief. Sit down as a drive team with your scouts, strategists, talk about what went right, what went wrong. If you're doing the same strategies over again and things are going wrong, you might realize, hey, maybe it's time to try something different. Or you might have tried something one time and it worked really well. Hey, let's keep doing it. I mean, you need to use a feedback loop here to really improve and iterate. Change things up. Don't be too conservative or risky. I mean, these are basic things. Also, slow and steady wins the race. So I see all these teams, they just blast over the defense. They come flying over the cheval. They land and they shoot right away and they miss. The time taken to line up for 2, 3, 4, 5 seconds is so much more valuable than time. You've missed the shot, now you're chasing a ball down and you're going back across. Take the time to line up. Slow and steady wins the race. Just, I know it's like a fable or whatever. Prepping for the finals, I think the one thing I really want to remind teams here, especially teams who are new to the championship, the elimination rounds are very, very different than qualifying. And they're very, very different than what we see on regionals. We saw in the drivers' meeting today, someone asked the question if robots were allowed to touch each other. So, I can see that people, come Saturday, defense is going to be picking up. You have to be ready for it. So, and targeted defense. If you've been scoring really well and people haven't been playing much defense on you in falls, guess what? It's going to change in the Olympics. The final comments on all of this as we wrap this presentation up is, it's really, really important that you read the rules, have a clear strategy, stick with your priority list, but also let's just think about the bigger picture here. What makes First Robotics special? And there's a lot of things. It's a program that involves mentors working with students, but we have a great culture here of people working together and doing things that are awesome. Let's not ruin that. Let's stay positive. And remember, we are all trying to win a world championship, but at what cost? There are rules, and people are like, oh, there's no rule against it. I'm not going to have a problem doing it. People who have been throwing matches this weekend because they want to slip to the second round. That's bull, man. That's bull. It's just not fair. It's not right. We can do better than that. So let's just try and keep our heads on straight this weekend and compete the right way. This is the end of the presentation. I just want to say thank you to everyone for attending. I've been doing FIRST since 1998, and I've been mentoring 11-14 since 2004, and that's where I developed this whole presentation and all that stuff. And I just want to say thank you to all of you. This weekend is going to be my last weekend as a mentor in FRC. I'm just going to be going on to do other things. And I'm still going to be around, I'm still going to be emceeing, I'm still going to be volunteering, but I just want to all you people here who are here to learn about strategy, I just want to say thank you, because you guys are the ones who motivated me to keep going. And hopefully that these lessons that I've developed, people will take forward and continue using, so I feel like as I walk away, this all doesn't just disappear. So thank you guys, have a great night. And if anyone has any questions, I'll be outside.